Is AI going to take my job? Will I ever see a decent residual from a streaming service? Is the self tape process ever going to get better for actors? These are just some of the hundreds of questions I've been asked over the past few weeks by our members about the 2023 TV theatrical streaming contract. Hello, everybody. I'm Duncan Crabtree-Ireland, SAG-AFTRA National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator. And today we're going to answer some of the most pressing questions our members have about the landmark agreement with the AMPTP. So, in order to give members the fullest picture of all the new benefits and protections the 2023 contract brings to our members, I've enlisted a vice chair of the negotiating committee and my co lead negotiator to explore and discuss the new and exciting provisions of this landmark $1 billion agreement. So, please welcome SAG-AFTRA Executive Vice President and Negotiating Committee Vice Chair Linda Powell and SAG-AFTRA Chief Contracts Officer Ray Rodriguez. Linda, Ray, welcome.
Thank you, Duncan.
So before we start the discussion, I'd like to encourage members to head over to the SAG-AFTRA YouTube channel where we have several other webinars about the new contract that dive deeper into some of the finer details of the agreement. And of course, there's always our page on the website at sagaftra.org/contracts2023, where you can find all the detailed information about every aspect of this agreement. Well, let's go ahead and get the show started. And why don't we start out by just talking about the $1 billion in new wages and benefit plan funding that this contract brings. Ray, why don't I start with you? Maybe just explain a little bit about where that $1 billion comes from and what it's going to mean for our members.
Sure. It comes from a number of different places. As always, one of the main drivers of that money is the minimums increases in the contract. And we've done something in this negotiation that has never been done before by any of the industry unions by breaking the industry pattern with our first year wage increase. And that will take us a good way in the direction of restoring people to their earning power that has been deteriorated by inflation. And indeed, we will catch people up over the term of this contract through those minimums increases.
You know, when you say breaking the pattern, let's just be clear. What does that mean exactly in terms of breaking the pattern, and why is that important?
Well, the way it has traditionally happened in this industry is that the first union to negotiates a wage deal that the other unions then have to live with. And that has been the way it's been in every negotiation that certainly that I can remember, probably that you can remember. In this cycle, we forced the industry to give us a higher first year wage increase than they had agreed to with any of the other unions that bargained ahead of us. And that is something that has never happened before. And it is very significant, not just because of the additional money that it means in our deal, but it has also put the lie to this concept that we all have to live with whatever the first union up to bat negotiated in this in any given cycle of negotiation. So that's valuable for us. It's also valuable for other industries or other unions in this industry.
Cool. Yeah, I mean that I think is really important. And sorry I interrupted you, but then I know we're going to talk about benefit plan funding as well. But I don't know if maybe Linda might want to jump in. I know both of you are trustees of our benefit plans as well as myself. And so, Linda, I don't know if you want to maybe talk about the significance of the benefit plan funding increase for members.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, raising the caps for one thing has been a long time coming, and I think a lot of members are excited to see those caps raised on the pension and health contributions. And we are hoping, it's one of our goals, to be able to restore some of the benefits that were lost when the health plan had to pull back so much. So getting this huge influx of funds into the plans is I think, going to mean a lot to our members.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree. And I think out of that $1 billion, there's more than $300 million that's going to be increased in new contributions to the benefit plans, the health plan, and both the after retirement fund and the SAG producers pension plan. And so that's a really significant increase in contributions that maybe will provide the trustees the opportunity to look at those kinds of changes.
And it'll make a big difference to members in terms of qualifying for healthcare, because members who were hitting the caps and not getting the full benefit of their residuals counted are going to possibly be able to qualify for healthcare when they wouldn't have before. So that's a big deal too.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes into the weeds, but it's exciting in a way because what a lot of members are probably familiar with is us increasing contributions by raising the contribution rate, the percentage that the employers pay. But because in both the SAG-AFTRA health plan and the SAG producers pension plan, all of your credit as a performer is based on earnings. It's not based on the contribution rate. Those caps really limited people more, and they hadn't been increased in a long time. So, to your point, I think raising those caps means actually the opportunity for members to gain more eligibility credit from the same amount of compensation or work that they might even be doing now. I'm going to turn back to Ray for this next piece, which is, well, I mean, and actually both of you probably have a lot to contribute on it. Everyone knows that AI is a very hot topic in this process. It was a hot topic throughout negotiation, and rightly so. And it's a hot topic now during the ratification phase. Let's talk a little bit about the concerns that our members have about AI and how the companies, the streamers and the studios plan to use the technology and sort of what our contractual protections are that are contained in this agreement. And maybe I'll start with Ray and then go back to Linda and jump into it myself.
Sure. I mean, I think the most significant set of protections have to do with consent and fair pay when a digital replica is made of you. There's going to be no more surprise scannings. You have to get 48 hours notice that a digital replica is going to be created of you. They have to get your consent in a clear and conspicuous way. They have to give you a reasonably specific description of what is going to be done with your digital replica. And only then can they get your consent. And with one minor exception, that consent is limited to the picture that you're on. So the whole idea that they can just make a scan of you, keep it in a library, and use it forever has been extinguished by this AI provision that we've negotiated. That is no longer a threat that our performers have to worry about. You are going to be bargained with and have the ability to grant your consent or not to the use of that digital replica, either beyond the reasonably specific description that you have been provided, or in another picture, or in another field or medium. So it really establishes your clear ownership over your own image and voice and sets the framework in place that is going to obligate producers to respect that, to get your consent, to bargain with you, and to pay you fairly.
As I've been talking to people about the contract and people have been calling me to talk about what we did, the biggest concerns I hear from people are just the fact that do we have to have AI in the contract at all? There's some people who just don't want to be scanned. They're worried about the safety of the images living out there in the future. And one thing I say to them is that without what we've put in, we're worse off. We can't push back against the inevitable march of this technology. And the protections that we've put in are a real foot in the door, a real huge benefit to members in terms of protecting them. And we can grow the protections as the technology grows.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with that. And I think one of the things that we have to recognize is we're starting, from a blank page. There are no AI specific protections in this contract prior to this negotiation. The idea that we could have somehow prohibited or banned the use of AI is just unrealistic. That was not going to happen, no matter how long we stayed on strike. I mean, it took 4 months for us to achieve what I think are a pretty comprehensive set of protections. They're not perfect. There are things we need to advance upon in future years, but when you look at what's actually happening now, what the legitimate basis for the greatest concern that our members should have, it is, of course, digital replication, because digital replication has been happening. It's already been used in the industry. The technology in this area is advancing, and this contract contains extensive protections against digital replication, whether it's done with AI or with any other technology that exists now or is ever developed in the future regarding the digital replication of performers. So I think that's a really important protection that helps us transition over the next couple of years and look at what kind of developments are happening in the industry. And also, of course, we have protections against the use of generative AI in the contract as well, including a right to notice, the right to negotiate over compensation or consideration in the event that there is generative AI used to create like a synthetic fake performer, things like that. Those aren't things that we expect to be happening during this term, but we have the protection anyway, just in case. And we have this right to meet with the companies twice a year so we can find out what they're doing, so we can plan ahead for our next round of bargaining and make sure that as we build on these protections, we're building our walls in the correct direction to help make sure that we are guarding against what's actually happening and not investing massive amounts of our bargaining leverage in something that's not realistic or not going to happen.
You know, those generative AI protections when we were negotiating, I was surprised that we got those, because they were very hesitant to give us any foothold into that world. And it's a big deal to people because they're feeling that generative AI and the creation of synthetic performers could possibly in the future replace our work. And so the fact that we have the ability to know when they're doing it and to watch how that grows, I think is a really huge deal. And also I try and remind members too, that a lot of this generative AI stuff, they don't necessarily need our work to create things. There's a lot of public data out there that's already been ingested into some of these machines.
That's true. And I think one of the things the company said, and it's understandable on a certain level, is that they don't want to agree to provisions that will make it impossible for them to compete with other companies who aren't part of this contract, whether that's, Google and YouTube or somebody else. So, that can't really govern everything we do, but it is the true motivation for why they've been so tough on the issue of limitations on what the company can do in generative AI. And even saying that, this contract contains extensive limitations on the use of AI, both generative and non-generative forms of AI. And the fact is, these are all limitations that don't exist today. So if we didn't have this contract and we just continued on with the 2020 contract language, none of those protections exist in that language. And that's really problematic, and why we spend so much time, energy, and bargaining leverage on achieving what's in this agreement.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Those were big gets.
Yeah, totally. But, even though AI has been probably the hottest topic, it's important to know there's a whole lot more in this contract besides only provisions that relate to AI. And I'd love to turn to you, Ray, and ask you to talk a little bit about the new streaming residuals formulas, how they've changed. I know there's a lot of gains for our members in this contract outside of the streaming bonus. So we'll leave the streaming bonus aside for a minute and just talk about streaming residuals in general. Can you give us a little info on that?
Yeah, look, for the domestic streaming formula, every element of it has improved. So the caps that apply to your compensation, which go into the front end of the formula, have increased. So now more of your compensation gets counted in calculating the residual. The exhibition year percentages that are applied to that cap compensation in years 8 through 11, all of that has increased as well. So that's another way the domestic residual is going up. And then the subscriber tiers, which are the third element of the formula, the two lowest tiers have been eliminated. So the ability to reduce your residual because your show is on a smaller platform has been substantially reduced. The 20% and 40% tiers are gone. The lowest percentage that can be applied is a 65% number. So every element of the domestic formula has improved. But all of that pales in comparison to the improvement that was made to the foreign side of this. Right now, your foreign streaming residual is calculated at 35% of what the domestic residual is. There is now going to be a complete separate calculation for the foreign residual that is going to have a set of foreign subscriber tiers that is going to amount to a very significant increase, in some cases more than doubling what the foreign streaming residual is now. And so that is going to be a significant driver of money in this contract. It's part of what accounts for that $1 billion price tag. And that's going to come to members in the form of streaming residuals, which is one of the areas where they have been crying out for it the most.
Yeah, I mean that streaming residuals increase. A lot of people have been focused on the streaming bonus money and the fund, et cetera, but the increase in streaming residuals is enormous. I mean, it's I believe more than $100 million of gains in this contract just from that area alone.
One of our goals going in was trying to address the fact that with the move of everything into streaming, some of our members, even members who are series regulars, were having trouble making ends meet because of the way that the residuals structures worked and so much of content moving over to that area. And I feel like when we got with these increases, we made a big dent into that. I'm really proud of these gains.
Yeah, I agree completely. And let's talk about the streaming bonus fund for a second. So one of the things I think we were, trying to do from the very beginning of this negotiation was develop a new and additional revenue stream for our members who are working in streaming, because the streaming business model is so problematic for reasons I think we all know, in terms of, very short orders, very long, hiatuses between seasons, et cetera. And so that was one of the priorities that the negotiating committee identified from the beginning. And we went through a bunch of iterations of it. I know people followed the drama probably throughout the process, from the streaming revenue share, which was attached to revenue, and then there was an adjustment of what the percentage was, and then it was reconfigured into a different form, and then reconfigured into the form that it is in this agreement. But I think the point of it is that there is now an additional payment coming out of streaming that's based on a combination of subscriber levels and viewership. And when you take that into account, the projects on streaming that hit more than 20% of the domestic subscribers having viewed it, then that triggers money coming into the system. And a majority of that money, 75% of that money, is going to go to the actors who work on those specific projects, as in the form of additional residuals. So that is, in essence, an increase of 75% in the residuals that they would receive. And then the other 25% of that money is going to go into a fund so it can be spread out more widely amongst actors who work on those streaming platforms, so that we can help create, not just in this contract, but in future cycles where we negotiate to improve upon these numbers, we can create an additional cumulative additive revenue stream that helps make it possible to make a living working in streaming projects. And I don't know about you, but I'm very excited about that. I'm excited about the fact that we have the flexibility on the distribution side that comes from the fund. For those who aren't that familiar with it, the fund is basically, it's a system where money comes in from the streamers in a lump sum, and then the fund's trustees are responsible for setting up distribution guidelines so that it's distributed equitably amongst the folks who are working on those projects. It's a concept we've had in place in our music contracts for over a decade. We have it in our commercials contracts just in the last negotiation, and now we'll have it in this contract. And I think it gives us an opportunity to really, number one, evolve the distribution structure with the industry as it changes, instead of having these contracts sort of locked in and having to hard bargain to get them to change. And number two, it gives us the opportunity to really deal with that outside of the cycle of negotiations. And I think that's going to be very helpful for our members as well. So I'm excited for that. Either of you want to say anything about the streaming bonus thing before we move on to a new topic?
I would just add, a lot of members have asked me about that 25%, how it's going to be divvied up, what's going to happen. And because that all came together towards the last couple of days of bargaining. And once we get the trustees in place, I think in conjunction with the TV Theatrical Standing Committee, we'll have to do a lot of modeling. What if we did it this way? What if we did it that way? And set some goals and see exactly how that will be distributed. But the good thing is it's ours to decide, which is exciting.
Agreed.
I guess I would add to that, there's an old adage in bargaining: you can bargain for structure or you can bargain for money, but you almost never get both. Here we kind of did get both. We set up a structure. We got $40 million a year, we're estimating, flowing into that structure. That's not nothing. But the point I really want to make now is just to remind people that we can come back to subsequent rounds of bargaining and continue to bargain more money into that structure, because we have the structure now. And so we can keep pushing that money up. And that really, the significance, therefore, of the streaming bonus goes beyond the 40 million that we're getting for people. We have created an entirely new avenue for money to go to our members from out of the streaming business. And that's a very big deal. That doesn't exist anywhere else. There's no other form of exhibition that has its own extra amount of money on top of the residual that is associated with it, that is collectively bargained. So we did something really new and unique in establishing that, and it's something that we're going to be able to build on for cycles to come.
That's one of the things that's so great about it being additive, as opposed to something that was a trade-off or took away anything from existing residuals. This is all cumulative on top of existing residuals, and even with the improvements that you described, Ray. So when you take all of that into consideration, I think that is a pretty good place to be. Linda, can we turn to the topic of self-tapes? Because this has been a very hot topic throughout the W&W process for very good reasons. Our members have been very concerned about it. Do you want to share some of what's happened in self-tapes in this agreement?
Self-tapes have been a huge issue of concern for all members. From the W&Ws, we get different things from different parts of the country and different markets, but everybody had lots of self-tape issues coming in from W&Ws. And we zeroed in on the ones that kind of seemed to be in common from all the different markets. And that was page length, turnaround time, and technical specifications. Too much technical specification about what your camera had to be or how your slate should be. And I think we did a lot to make things easier for members who, when they're self-taping. We were able to limit the number of pages, 8 pages for a first audition, 12 pages for a second audition. You get 48 hours turnaround, 72 hours if you're a minor. And very exciting, those 48 hours cannot include weekends or holidays, which, is a big deal. And now, they can only ask for, a very simple slate, not a million different things. And you also, and I did this last week, first audition I got since the negotiations were over, I did the Zoom audition, because they have to offer a virtual or a Zoom alternative. So I got my audition on a Friday. It wasn't due until Tuesday because of the 48 hours and the weekend. And I was able to send my agent an email and say, I'd like to do the Zoom version, please. And I said, see, isn't my union great?
Yeah, it's funny because when we talked about these changes, especially the weekends one, but also the other pieces, we've gotten, literal applause from rooms full of our members, because I think the practices involved in self-taping had gotten, out of hand. And this feels like reeling it in a way that allows self-tapes to continue to exist, because there are a lot of our members who like them and who want to be able to have the opportunity to do self-tapes, but who want it to be, within a framework that respects them as artists and just as human beings. And so that's good. And we should note, there's also the prohibitions on nudity. There's the prohibitions on doing stunts during self-tapes. So some of the worst kind of abuses that we heard about are now formally prohibited. So Ray, let's talk about background actors for a minute. What are some of the achievements that are present in this contract that particularly impact the background community?
Well, I think the background community should be popping champagne as a result of this deal. I never thought, honestly, I would live to see the day in my career at SAG-AFTRA where the number of covered positions between the East Coast and the West Coast would be equalized. It just seemed like a fantasy to believe that could happen. It has always been the case prior to this that is an issue where the improvement comes in ones and twos, and you add a position here and a position there, and it would have taken decades to equalize those numbers. And to see it happen all in one fell swoop is absolutely amazing. And it shows in the calculations that were done, the value of this almost 11,000 additional workdays for background actors added in a single negotiation. It's amazing. It is a jaw-dropping achievement, and it's not the only thing in the deal for background actors either. There is now pay for photo doubles and stand-ins that recite lines as part of a run-through. There are other protections that have been achieved for background actors. There's been an equalization for background actors of the notice requirements for nudity and simulated sex work. Background actors are going to be some of the primary beneficiaries of what we bargained in the area of AI. And we were very diligent, as anyone who reviews that memorandum or summary will see, in ensuring that our background actors had the same rights as principals in that section. So many things for background in this deal. It really is, it's the most historic deal for background that there has possibly ever been.
Absolutely. And let's not forget outsized increases to the minimums as well, because the background actors have already seen, actually, as of November 9th, an effective date, an 11% increase in minimums right away. And within the first year, by next July, there'll be an additional 4% increase, which means that first year compounded increase for background is in excess of 15%. It's like 15.5%. So it is huge on top of everything else that you said, Ray. Like, I agree. And by the way, when we're talking about those numbers, it is kind of stunning when you think about it, going from 57 covered positions for theatrical projects in the West Coast to 85. I mean, that's 28 additional covered positions per day on each of those theatrical projects. And so it is a huge number. And that almost 11,000 additional covered workdays, that's per year in this contract. So over the term of the contract, that's, multiply that out. So it is a really amazing deal for background actors. And of course, we did want to try and create a single background schedule for East Coast and West Coast. We weren't able to get that completely done because there are a few pieces that still need to be done in the next round of bargaining. But the biggest, heaviest lift of that, which is equalizing those numbers, is completely done, 100% done in this agreement. And it is an exciting moment. I'd like to ask both of you this question, and I'll say it too. But maybe I'll start with Ray. What would you say to a member who's considering voting against ratification of this deal? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would advise them to reconsider. We've been over already a number of topics where massive improvements have been made as part of this contract that would immediately go away if we fail to ratify it. So everything we just talked about with respect to AI, everything we just talked about with respect to the streaming bonus, to the improvements to the streaming residuals, to self-tapes, all gone if this contract doesn't ratify. And the theory that we are going to be able, therefore, to go back and negotiate a better deal, I do not think is a valid theory. I think that we will be putting ourselves in a situation where we would need to go back out on strike. I think we would, and we would do that without any guarantee that a further strike would yield further improvements. I think we would find a very different reception from the AMPTP and the companies if we were to go back to square one in this negotiation, and it would come at a real price in people's lives to have to go back out on strike after already enduring 4 months of a SAG-AFTRA strike, 2 months beyond that of a Writers Guild strike. People are really struggling, and they will have to suffer a lot more to improve upon the terms of the deal, even if it's possible, which frankly I'm skeptical that we would return and be able to negotiate something better. And on the flip side, if we do ratify this deal, we're back into wages and working conditions for the next negotiation of this contract in probably 2 years. So those who have issues that they feel were not adequately addressed in this cycle should redirect that energy and come to our wages and working conditions process in a very short amount of time. And we will work for further improvements in the next cycle. But there's just so much on the table in this deal, $1 billion worth of gains, breakthroughs in AI, breakthroughs in streaming, breakthroughs in self-tapes, that it would really be, I think, a potentially historic mistake to fail to ratify this deal.
I agree with all of what Ray said. I also feel like, I appreciate all the conversation and energy around this ratification. I think it's a direct result of the engagement we had during the strike, and I think all of that is a good thing for us as a union. And I would just ask that people be realistic about what a negotiation is and what is achievable and how leverage makes a difference in what's achievable, and take a real good look at the leverage we have going forward and the leverage we don't have going forward. And you remember that this is now at this point a 2.5-year contract, and educate yourself on when the wages and working conditions meetings happen. Make note of the things that you wish were different and bring them back, because we get to do this again in 2.5 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, to me, several people have said this during our info meetings, but I think Ray quoted an adage, a bargaining adage before. I'll just quote a life adage, which is, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And the fact is, while there are things in this agreement, like in every collective bargaining agreement, that can always be improved, that's what the whole concept of collective bargaining is. This agreement is really important for this moment in time. And the provisions, not only regarding AI, but certainly including AI, as well as everything else that we've talked about today, these are gains that are really important to our members. Our members need this, and they need it now. They need the increases. They need all of the additional protections. They need the changes to the casting process and so many other things that we didn't even have time to talk about in this podcast, but which people can find in the materials that we've got posted on sagaftra.org/contracts2023, or you can find in our social media channels and everywhere else. There is a lot there. And I really think that folks, I agree with Ray, I think folks who believe that it would be, that it would, if the members voted no and didn't ratify this agreement, that somehow that would result in the studios offering better terms to us in the near future. I don't agree with that statement at all. I think that would not result in that, and it would result in us having to go back on strike probably for an extended period of time, and that would not necessarily yield better results. That's certainly a reality. So yeah, I mean, I think it's clear to me that if you are considering a no vote, you should really review the materials. Obviously, every member has the right to vote their conscience. Every member has a right to have their opinion, and they may certainly disagree from mine or Ray's or Linda's. But what I would say is make sure that you're fully informed. Make sure that you've had a chance to review all the materials. We published the full draft memorandum of agreement, so that is available to members now. And just make sure you've informed yourself so that you understand what's at stake when you cast your vote, yes or no. Certainly our negotiating committee unanimously recommends a yes vote. Our national board recommends a yes vote by an 86% margin. And as the chief negotiator, I unequivocally believe that this deal is the best deal we could possibly achieve, given the strike and everything else that we did to achieve it, and that it absolutely warrants ratification and a yes vote by our members. All right, well, that's our episode. I want to take this moment to thank Linda and Ray for joining us today, and remind everybody watching this program to educate themselves about the new contract before voting. The voting deadline is 5 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday, December the 5th. That's 5 p.m. Pacific, Tuesday, the 5th of December. Don't miss the deadline. Educate yourself, but vote before that cutoff. You can head to SAGAFTRA.org, or you can click the link in the video description below to learn more about the 2023 TV theatrical streaming contract. Do it now. Thank you.